Hello, everybody. Christian Pavarelli here from We Are No Code, and we are back with another awesome episode of Behind the Movement, where we go into entrepreneurship for non-technical founders. And today I have a very, very special guest. His name is James Devonport. He is a serial entrepreneur. He has raised capital for his companies. He has, product management skills. He is a no-code wizard. He has built userloop.io. You can see it right next to his name, so go check it out immediately. James, thank you so much for joining us today. I can't wait to jump into this episode.
No, thanks so much for having me. I've got to live up to that introduction now. Thank you very much. Awesome.
Don't worry, we'll keep it super casual and fun as well. I think that's what the audience digs here as well. So let's jump first into, why don't you tell us a little bit more about this startup that you've built and now have grown to about $10,000 in monthly recurring revenue?
Well, yeah, we're on the road to 10k MRR. Yeah, so the app's called userloop.io, and it's an app for Shopify stores that helps them get more positive reviews and understand their customer feedback. So it does tons of stuff. So it automatically emails customers after they make a purchase and asks them how it went, and depending on what they say, it redirects them to leave a review. And it also embeds surveys within like the checkout and confirmation process. So it's very, very tightly integrated into Shopify. It's on the Shopify App Store. Stores can sign up and use it pretty much with 2 or 3 clicks. It's no integration or anything like that. It installs itself all automatically. So it's very, very easy to get up and running, and you can start getting feedback within about a minute. So it's pretty.
So if you know someone who's a Shopify seller, absolutely send this to them as well, because they'll be very interested to see that there is a better way to get good reviews, right? Let's jump down to the no-code bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because I mean, the fascinating thing about this story is that you are a non-technical serial entrepreneur like myself. We've built companies as non-technical people, have had to face a lot of the same issues that you have to face when you don't know how to code and you're trying to build a company that's online or a SaaS platform. In your case, you built this entire platform out in no code. Tell us a little bit about that experience. Maybe tell us a little bit about, why did you build it with no code to begin with? Did it have to do with something that you had done previously, or was it just because you'd learned a tool like Bubble and could? Tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah. So I guess it probably helps to give a bit of context around why I came to that point. So I've kind of started several startups over the years and raised money for them, and obviously engineers are extremely pretty expensive, and it takes a lot of capital to build a SaaS product traditionally. So that's always been the way that I've kind of had to go about it, because I've tried teaching myself to program a load of times over the last kind of 15 years probably, and it just never really clicked for me. I've really tried to learn Python and Ruby and all this stuff, and I think just the whole typing in the code and seeing it in a big window, I just never could fully kind of grip it. So I was always able to do kind of HTML websites and things like that, but I was never able to do very in-depth kind of database-powered apps. So it was really exciting to, over the last kind of 3 to 4 years, see no-code platforms absolutely, start really knocking it out of the park in terms of what you can build with them. I started using them. I started using Bubble in particular in 2017 or so. Just building fun little apps with it, really little experimental type things. So I built like a thing to manage development sprints, a tool for playing online kind of quizzes and stuff with colleagues, which I actually ended up selling as well. So that was like, you can actually exit like these no code things and sell them on. And it was just throughout that process of building these apps, I was like, wow, it's actually totally possible to build a very kind of advanced SaaS platform now without being a programmer. So it's kind of mind blowing, really, that that's a possibility. And I think it's only really starting to become clear now that the no code apps aren't necessarily just a very simple kind of web app that does a limited amount of stuff. These apps can do an unbelievable amount of stuff, like in terms of functionality. We're talking about everything from integrating with Google's cloud machine learning to video transcoding to OpenAI and GPT-3. So like, there's people are doing some unbelievable stuff with no code. And I think that's why I started building this product 6 months ago over Christmas, and it kind of really went from there. It was a bit of a just, can I do this first? And as you see the product come along, you're like, yeah, it's absolutely possible to build it in this way. So why wouldn't I? Because it's essentially at no risk. There's no capital being raised. The only thing that's being risked is my spare time, effectively, in learning how to do it and build it myself. But I've not had to recruit any other programmers or anything like that, really. I've had one or two people help me out, like from the community, from the Bubble community, but essentially I've not had to raise hundreds of thousands to build this thing. And
which
it's there every day.
Changes the game, right?
Yeah, it really does.
It's gonna, yeah, and it's super exciting. So a couple things that you just brought up, and by the way, I love the narrative that you're putting forth here. But essentially, so the first thing I really like about what you said is that when you got into some of these no-code tools, the point was mainly to build something. You weren't necessarily looking, you're like, I'm going to build something just fun because I can learn this tool and I'll be able to use those skills for anything else in the future. And then the idea for this startup came up, and then you were properly set up to do that. I think that's really smart, because some people jump into no code and they're like, I need to build this app in the next 2 months. And it's like, well, between learning a tool and and then it really depends where you're at, right? But I think that it's really smart in making that distinguish that the time it's going to take, like a couple months to learn some of these tools. Some of them it's just a couple of weeks. Some of them it's a couple of days. Some of it's more complex ones, a couple of months. But essentially, upskilling is what's going to give you that possibility. So guess what? James did that, and then the day that the startup that he wanted to build came up, then that was just a perfect opportunity to seize everything you'd learned. So first of all, I really love that narrative. Now tell us, you've talked about a couple of that you're really excited about this no-code space and where it's going. Where do you think that this whole thing is going as a larger movement, because obviously it's like kind of like the natural evolution of programming, where it's like, we don't necessarily have to, before it was like, we don't need to write the ones and zeros. We created code to be able to say what we wanted the ones and zeros to do. And then now it's like, okay, well, you don't even need to do that. You just need to use a visual interface and create the logic and the visual design as well. So where do you think this is eventually going to go? Let's say, 5 years down the road, where do you see we are?
Well, I guess the first thing is that probably I wouldn't really think of no-code platforms or that concept of being an entirely new thing. I can think back almost like 20 years to things like GeoCities or Moonfruit or all these other platforms where you could build websites without code. It's just that over the last few years, it's getting more and more, the things you can build with them are more and more capable. So now we've got something like Bubble, where we can build like very advanced kind of web apps, and we've got like Adalo for kind of mobile apps, and we've even got things like VoiceFlow where you can build very, very like impressive Alexa skills, for example. So I would see it continuing down that road in that pretty much I'd imagine kind of 80 to 90% of apps that people use every day could be built in this way. And I think that's actually really exciting for engineers as well, and for people who can code, because it means they're freed up to go and work on much more interesting challenges than building kind of a CRM, something like that. You can go off into like AI and all of these other kind of applications that where code is still needed, and code's always going to be needed, I think, even though like OpenAI is able to kind of conjure up code out of nothing now. But it's I think it ultimately it's going to mean people can build pretty much anything they want to using this technique without having to do years and years of formal education in it, and maybe without having a very technical brain. Like I don't really I never clicked with that method of programming where it's all very text based. But the thing that really clicks for me about no code is it's workflow based and it's all very visual. So for me it just makes it's easier logically to understand what's going on with something, because it's literally pretty much all no code tools are flowcharts essentially, where you're kind of working things through, and it's all very logical. And for me that was and I think for a lot of other people as well, it's just much easier to consume and understand what's going on and to build things in that way. I think over the next few years we'll probably see some giant companies emerge that are built using in this way, because we've got a lot of people who are experts in their field, whether that might be construction or whatever. They've never been able to build what they wanted. If you couldn't code, you couldn't do it. Now you can. So you can have people from very kind of expert in their own domain build their own software without having to kind of try and explain it to someone else. I think it's going to be very exciting to see how it unfolds over the next few years.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point, right? Like this no-code movement, we were talking about this off air, essentially is like, it has a bad rep with developers, but developers don't realize that this is actually going to be easier for them to use to their favor than anyone else, because they already walk into it and have certain concepts around technology in general, right? Understanding like databases, for example, being one clear example. But I think that there is definitely, and it's because, as you said, like the wording, no code itself is maybe not the right term for these platforms. And I think there's even just a clear line between, the no-code tools that are used to automate or to do automations, and the ones that are used to build software, right? So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. But I definitely think that one of the biggest gap is not necessarily the tools anymore. We've gotten to a place where you can build like 80% of everything, basically. Now the question is more around like getting more people and the right projects in front of these kind of technologies. And I think it's like I think it's actually upskilling. It's like connecting humans with those things, right? But I guess that's always been in history. That's always been the biggest problem, right? Education at some level,
and just making people really realize this is completely attainable. It's completely doable. It's not it's not that hard to get started with it. I think, like we said earlier, if you start with something very small and manageable, something that maybe you're building for fun, that is a great way to, and suddenly you're kind of like mind blown of like, wow, I can actually build these things that, I've never been able to do before. And I think it is interesting for engineers also in that perspective, that this is going to mean that a whole new generation of product managers and product designers can actually prototype something through to being a working product, and even test it with some users to really validate that this is something people want before it goes to the engineering team. So, it's really kind of making sure that when engineers are building something, it's battle tested and, this is definitely something people want. And I can't think of anything better that in terms of specification than, saying here's a working kind of prototype and this is what we want to productionize. So, I'm super optimistic that it's actually a really good thing for engineers of, no code and, coding. I think it's a great thing for both sides.
I think so too. No, and it's going to be exciting. I think it's unfolding as also, like I'd say that, you having built this platform out is one of the great, basically examples that we have to show people for them to understand the potential of what this really has to give to them specifically. I think that sometimes people, because of course in startup land or in tech land, we have a tendency to be a little snobby and want to leave people out by using complicated acronyms for things like API or some of the basic things sometimes, but just people don't understand what that means. So I think that but they're not very complicated concepts to understand. You can compare them to lots of other things. And those are some of the things that we actually tap into to make sure people understand what they're doing behind the scenes. Actually, I want to ask you a question, because this, like, you're kind of like me, where we've never been technical and have also been product managers when we were forced to, right? You're trying to build a product and you're hiring people, designers, developers. Obviously, no code is completely disrupting also the process of building software, where it's no longer like, oh, okay, let's think about, well, before it was just basically like, let's think about, okay, what are the different, like, what's the user experience we want to give? Okay, let's create some wireframes. Let's create some user flows. Let's talk to a designer who's going to design a version of this. He's going to pass that off to a developer who's going to integrate the functionalities behind it. Then we're going to, it seems very convoluted. And with no code, it kind of feels like, and I say this just, from our own experience, but basically like it all happens at the same time kind of thing. And so, it's also difficult to reject that this will have some kind of influence over the way that things currently work. And that, yeah, some people's, I wouldn't say their jobs are at risk, but I'd just say like they have to adapt to this version of building, right? What would you say the main difference is, having done both of those jobs as well, like being the no coder, the full stack no coder, and also being the product manager?
Yeah, I think it's like you said. It brings it compresses the time frame, but between each step of that like traditional development process, from the beginning where maybe a product manager does an interview with a user, through to writing a ticket, getting it designed, planning out the API, having it actually built. As it each step in that process takes time, and where you're doing essentially, like you say, all of those things at the same time, you're able to test stuff really quick. And this has happened for me in my day jobs where I've worked as a product manager. I know how our company API worked and what was available, so I could actually use a tool like Bubble to prototype a new product idea that actually worked. So and you get completely different responses from users, I feel like, when you're actually using a real prototype that works, as opposed to a clickable kind of design. Really, you can really understand the nuance of what's the interaction here, and are people getting what they expected? Whereas you may not have realized that until you'd gone through the design and build, and then you had to go back again. So it's really it's really about that unbelievable opportunity to accelerate your development and finding product market fit for new features faster, basically, skipping all those steps.
Yeah. So what was your least favorite part of being a product manager?
I think product managers have it pretty tough a lot of the time. I just think any of us who've ever done it knows, because you're trying to kind of coordinate everyone and get everyone pointing in the same direction and make things happen. So yeah, often just the pure logistics of coordinating all of that is a challenge sometimes. So I find it so fun to be able to having picked up the no code way of doing things, just to be able to prototype something myself on the weekend for fun and say, hey, what do you think about this, without having to go through all those steps, is really fun. And for stuff like internal hack days and things like that, this can be a really good way of just getting people excited about doing stuff quickly. Because we've all worked in companies, and it takes time to get features out a lot of the time. It's complex. Like, there's a lot to go through, and I think it's one of the things that anyone who's involved in the no code stuff just finds so exciting. Is customer can ask for a feature, and within an hour it's live. Like it's really powerful. Even if that was the only reason you use no code alone, was the ability to iterate and ship quickly, that's an amazing reason to consider it. Not that can't be done with coded stuff, but it's not as common, I would say, from what I've seen. So yeah, it's just such an exciting opportunity.
Love it. So going back to the product manager, it sounds like your direct answer is meetings.
Yeah.
So many meetings. a meeting to plan a meeting to plan a meeting. No, love it. And then also, I love how you talked right now about the versatility of no code. Like, yes, you can do entrepreneurship and, like see if your idea actually is worthy of the market or if you can get customers, but also intrapreneurship. You can also just use it for like fun projects that you have on the side. Like, there are a lot of use cases. Could you tell us some of the use cases? Because you've definitely, you've told us that you've built a couple different things just for fun. Tell us of, just a couple examples so that the audience can get an idea how, different some of these things can be.
Yeah, I mean, one example is, so I worked at a company that was very fintech in nature and was doing automated references for people who want to move house. So I wanted to prototype a new idea on one of our, we did a hack day internally, and I built a new interface through Bubble that integrated with our API and let people kind of apply and do the references through this app. But yeah, using our own API. Other ones, like completely crazy fun ones that I've just done where for people playing bingo in pubs lately. I've got some friends who run, pub nights, and with all of the COVID stuff, they're not able to do it all on paper or whatever. So I made a Bubble app, and there's, hundreds of people playing along on this Bubble app, that's just completely for fun. So like, it shows you can go from, quite a serious kind of fintechy type thing through to literally something that people are playing while they're having a pint, and it's kind of a bit of fun. But that whole spectrum is there. So I can't think of many other kind of platforms where you can do stuff like that. It's pretty cool.
I love that. Yeah, that's so cool. And for those Americans who are watching right now, or people who are not from the UK at all or not familiar, bingo at pubs or like pub game nights are huge in the UK. It's like a huge thing. So when COVID hit, that was probably the thing that hurt the Brits the most, right?
Okay, definitely. I think everyone missed out on bingo. So thank God we got that no code app to get them playing again.
That's amazing. So listen, I mean, obviously having this conversation with you, it's so obvious that you have a lot of wise insights to share. There are entrepreneurs who love watching this channel, or people who would love to become entrepreneurs. Some of those people are non-technical. Like, what are maybe like stepping away from no code specifically, and going more towards like good advice that you've learned through your successes and failures of being an entrepreneur. What would be some advice that you think you wish you had heard when you started your first startup?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of it I probably did hear, and like we all do, we end up kind of ignoring it. Like there's often so much advice. It's like, what do you listen to sometimes? But I think there are some things that are kind of always true, and are more in many ways more true than ever now. Is really to try and focus down and be very, very succinct and clear in what you're what market you're trying to address and what you're trying to build, because it's as with starting any business, and particularly with no code ones, you can kind of go off and say, God, I want this to do everything, and I want it to have every feature and appeal to everyone, because you can add features quick. But that importance of really narrowing down and knowing a niche that you want to target first, because you can always expand later once you've got product market fit with a niche, but really to try and zero down on that market. And some tools I've used that have been really good for that is Amazon have a process that they go through where they write a press release before starting anything on a new product. Like, the press release comes at the beginning, and there's like templates of it you can go and fill out. But it's really helpful for like focusing down your mind of what are the actual benefits of this thing I'm building, and why was someone going to give me money for it? Like, because you can get lost in all of the technical coolness of what you're doing, but at the end of the day, how is this adding value? That's the thing to always kind of try and come back to, because we can all get kind of carried away with building stuff. So yeah, that's certainly one thing. But yeah, I think in general, like, just start, because I think like that we're all so guilty of never actually, we build something forever, or we never show it to anyone, or we never put it out there. I think this user loop thing that I'm working on now is quite a good example of something that I could have worked on for 2 years and never shown anyone. But I worked on it over Christmas, and I just thought, what? I'm just going to put it on Twitter, and I don't care. Let's see what happens, because I've made so many things that don't resound. Don't. I think we've all tried, making loads of stuff, and it doesn't hit. But if you do get something, you've just got to put it out there to see whether people engage with it. And with this one, they did, and it gives you that encouragement to carry on with it. So yeah, kind of share it early, and don't be too precious about working on it for 6 months, because you might be going down the wrong path. So it's better to get something out there as soon as possible.
I love that, because actually, like, starting is much more terrifying than people think. Like, this idea of a launch, this idea of oh, I need to show this thing, but it's not perfect, right? The biggest mistakes I definitely see in entrepreneurship is like mistaking shipping with like perfection. It's like, when you get something out there, it should be not perfect. It should really be. And I think that people get held back because ultimately it's like, we take what we do as such a close thing to who we are. Like, we really think that our identity is heavily linked to individual things that we do, right? And of course, to a certain extent it does, but I think that's what makes people fear failure, actually. It's like, what if I put this out there and then I face failure? And I think that, like, as soon as you've gone through building startups and kind of understand the methodology, like, you understand that, like, hey, it's about like, okay, let's quickly understand what's not working so we can move quicker towards an experiment that does work. And over time, like, like, obviously some ideas will be better than others, but the one thing I love about what you're saying is basically, it's this idea, and you're saying this between the lines, that like with no code, you could just reduce the amount of time that it takes to go from like, hey, I have an idea, to like, let's see if people want it and are willing to pay for it. And so suddenly it gives people, more energy to put towards other projects if they see that one doesn't work, or to like adapt it more towards what that person is looking for, essentially increasing the chances of success, right?
I think on, I must have built like 20 no-code apps, and hardly any of them work or don't catch on, And at the end of the day, I think we all end up obsessing, like, what are people going to think about it? And like, at the end of the day, no one cares. No one remembers the failures. So like, just like put it out there and see what happens. But I think it's so easy for us to, for us all to just get obsessed with, oh, what do people think? But the reality is they don't really think anything, and they don't really remember unless, they only remember the good stuff. So you've got nothing to lose really by just putting it out there and seeing what happens.
I love that. That's such a good thing. It's like, just practice, and then you only need to be right once. And then suddenly, guess what? After 20 years of work or 10 years of work, trying to launch things, suddenly you'll be seen as an overnight success. Great. And that's what you hear. Yeah, that's what you see in the headlines, right? You don't hear you don't see all the work below it, right?
No, definitely. And following that thread of what we said earlier, all that no code's done in that process is it's just reduced the amount of time that you get to success or failure. So, instead of raising 500 grand and paying a team to build something that fails, isn't it great that you can build it yourself in a week and it fails, but you've saved yourself a year and 500 grand. So it's it's really helped speed up that process of getting to failure. And yeah, a lot of it's going to fail, but you only need that one that's going to be the one that hits, and you just got to keep pushing away till you get to one of those.
Wise words from James Devonport. I wanted to before asking you the last question, which is going to be a bit existential, tell these people where they can find you if they want to reach out, if they want to try userloop.io. Again, that is the domain. But tell them where they can reach out to you.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at James Devonport. If you are a Shopify store owner, you can find Userloop on the Shopify App Store. I've also just started a newsletter where I'm writing about the process of building Userloop and all the plugins and APIs that I'm using, really to try and help people understand you can build awesome SaaS apps without being a programmer. So you can sign up for that from my Twitter profile as well. So yeah, I think they're probably the main ones.
Love that. Now, The last question for you, James, is what is the influence that you want to have in this space? It could be the no code space, it could be entrepreneurship, it could be in life.
I yeah, I think the influence I'd like to have is to really encourage people to get out there and have a go, because the possibilities right now are unimaginable. Like 20 years ago when I was, or 15, 20 years ago when I was starting to try and build websites and stuff, I could not have dreamed at the power of what no code can do today. Like I'm still kind of mind blown that I'm able to make all this stuff. So like there has never ever ever been a better time to get out there and make your idea real and bring it to life. You don't need tons of money. You don't need years of education. You can train yourself on YouTube and in the communities of these tools, and you can build something, a piece of software that people will pay you money for without being a programmer. I mean, sounds nuts, but it's absolutely possible. So like, if there's one thing I would just encourage everyone to do is, if you've got an idea, start on it with making a very small, basic first version of it and put it out there. And you know what? People might surprise you and they'll love it. And you'll be so glad that you actually, you put it out into the world and made something. So, yeah, I think that's the thing I'd just love to encourage people, is to just have a go, because you'll be absolutely amazed at what you can build once you start picking up what these tools can do.
Love that. So if you haven't already, for everyone who's watching, go and follow James on Twitter, sign up for his newsletter, and send this to anyone who has an Amazon store, because they're going to make more sales, because people care about reviews when it comes to Amazon products a lot. Every time I'm shopping for even the most random stuff at home, wallpaper, that I've installed my first wallpaper the other day, I looked at all the reviews. So it's a very useful product. And I know that James is really leading by example. So I would really heavily influence everyone here to go and follow him. And we can't wait to hear more news about your startup. I want to thank you for joining here and sharing your awesome words of wisdom with the founders who are looking and potentially waiting for the right moment. There is no right moment to start their startup. And I think that you really just exemplified like that being done right? You didn't leave your full-time job. You were able to do things on the side. You learned over time, and you've been able to launch so many awesome products from that. James, thank you so much for doing what you're doing, not only for entrepreneurship, but for the no-code community. And we'll see you super soon in another episode. Absolutely. Take care, everyone, and thanks for watching. See you in the next episode. Take care.